today, and next year's 50 years ago, isn't it? So it's quite a long way back. And although it is a long way back, there's things, you know, that happened on that particular day that you never ever forget in your lifetime. I'm perfectly sure of that, because sometimes I might even be digging in the garden and you think of a certain thing that happened somewhere on a certain day, the anniversary, probably the 30th year or the 20th year or whatever it was, but you always do. And I've always made it a habit of going out and taking the wife out to dinner on D-Day, wherever I've been. And one of the most unusual places that I have ever did this, we were on a trip to China and Tibet, and we were right up at the top of the mountains in Tibet, and it was the anniversary of D-Day. And the night before we went up there, I said to the fella in the hotel, had he got a bottle of champagne? This was a coach trip up over the mountains or one thing like that. And he said, yes, I have, he said. I said, well, how much is it going to be? He said, £65. I thought, well, Charlie, you don't usually pay this sort of money for that. But I did, in fact, buy a bottle of champagne, and I have got cine film and a bit of other film actually showing us drinking this champagne on the top of the mountain in Tibet, when all the locals came from nowhere, all came to see what we were doing. And the Chinese fella that was guiding us up there in Tibet, he couldn't work this out at all. And before I'd left the hotel, the manager there, he was a German. And he said, well, why do you want this champagne? Why do you pay this price? Why do you want it? And I couldn't really tell him what it was until he came back. And after he came back, I did explain it to him and show him the photograph we'd taken up on the mountains. And this champagne was called Mum Champagne. You've seen it advertised. And I sent a photograph to Mum Champagne in France and told them where their bottle of champagne was being drunk, and they sent me a big bottle back. So I was hoping they would actually. But it was something unusual, you know. But D-Day, a lot of people would say, well, it was just a battle. But it wasn't. D-Day was something special to every person that was involved in it. And we're ever so lucky tonight. In this room, on the three beaches, Gold, Sword and Juno, you've got a man from Juno, you've got a man from Sword, and myself on Juno. So there we are. There's one, Mr. Kirkham. Here's another one, Charlie Raybould. So all three of us were in Normandy on that particular day. Now, what I want to do is to try to explain D-Day a little bit before we get to the actual invasion itself, because it was so vast. And up until 1942, I belonged to a field company, and it was called 184 Field Company, Royal Engineers. And right up until the end of 1942, we expected the Germans to invade England. And for the whole of the year and a few months before that, I'd been there on the South Cone, I'd been to Bournemouth, Branscombe, I'd been to Boscombe, I'd been to the Isle of Wight, and I think we mined all the big hotels right along the seafront. I often wondered if they ever took them out. But there we are, and we did it on the Isle of Wight. What we did on the Isle of Wight, not only did we do the hotels, we did the airfield as well, and it was done with 60-foot pipe mines, and these mines were laid in a crisscross, and they were expecting the Germans to land on the Isle of Wight. That was going to set up an headquarters to actually be so they could pounce on the south of England. And when you think about it, it all made sense, because the German barges, everything were there all ready for the off. And actually, talking to some German soldiers afterwards, some years ago, they sung me the invasion song that they all learned. We're fahren gegen England. We are driving to England, and they'd actually got this all done. But down in Boulogne and Calais and all these places, all their troops were there waiting to pounce on south of England. So that is why we mined all these places. So as soon as they got here, and settled down, we could blow them up. Now that was brilliant thinking when you think about it. And as I say, now please, would you stop me at any time, I don't mind, any time you like if you're not understanding what I'm trying to explain, because a lot of the words that we used for the D-Day landings were virtually code words and things like that that you probably don't normally hear when you're listening to war films and things like that. So if there's anything you want to know, just put your hand up and I'll stop and try to explain it to you. Then it was just before Christmas 1942. I was in a company, and this company was so mixed up. It was let me tell you, I was the only Englishman in it. The others were all Scotch and Welsh miners, all been family men, worked in the mines, because originally the company had been a tunnelling company, had done the tunnels at Dover and along the White Cliffs of Dover. And I didn't get on very well in this company, to be quite honest. My life was really made a misery, and it's simply because I was the only Englishman. And bearing in mind then I was 19, made up to a Lance Corporal, which didn't go down at all when you get the 35-year-old miners, you know, the blazes that he think he is, you know. We're not doing this, we're not doing that. And it was awkward. I volunteered for the airborne. I volunteered for the paragliders. Anything I could get out of, I'd try to get out of this company. But it didn't work. And one day I went to the major, I said, well, look, I must get out of this company. It's driving me crazy, you know. He said, well, look, I can tell you, as from Christmas this year, we shall no longer be mining hotels and airfields and things along the south coast. We are going to be trained as a company for the invasion, he said, and we shall have a lot of new young people coming in. The older ones will all go. Well, I breathed a sigh of relief, and sure enough, in February, March of the following year, 1943, they did. There's a lot of youngsters all came in, all about my age, and I got on quite well then. Then they formed us up into what was to be beach groups, specifically for the landings in Normandy. So we knew, well, not Normandy we didn't know, the invasion of Europe I should have said. And so we knew right from that word go that when the landings come we should be there in the forefront of the landings. Now what happened then? We set up as a beach group. We had no landing craft at all, but they decided they would send us up to a place in Scotland called Dundonald, just outside Ayr, and we would be there. We would go to HMS Dundonald. Now this was highly delightful. I thought, hello, we're going on a warship here, we're all right. We shall actually sleep in a hammock and have good food. We've been sleeping in tents up in Scotland for I don't know how long. And we gets to HMS Dundonald, the lorry's all rolled up. What do we find? Two Nissan huts. HMS Dundonald. Anyway, a couple of days later, we had a day's break up there, and a couple of days later he said, right, we're going to start our first landings today, and if you will all parade tomorrow morning in full kit, everything you got, greatcoat, blankets, the lot, and parade up outside the huts. We'll go. So anyway, we came out in the morning and had a breakfast, got on the beach. Well, where's the landing craft then, you know? Oh, we haven't got any landing craft. You walk out into the sea up to your neck, and when we shout, turn around, come back in, pretend you got out of a boat. And that was a fact in 1943. They hadn't got enough landing craft to train us in. I don't know how these two Herberts went on. They might have been luckier than me, but this is what happened to me anyway. So anyway, that's the sort of things you came across. You hadn't really got the tackle. And there they were, training an army to cross the channel, and they hadn't got a boat to put you in at that particular time. They got some, but I suppose they were specialised things, because there were so many different types of landing craft, you wouldn't believe it. Then the first organisation started to come of the beach group, and we were beach group number 8. There was 10 beach groups altogether, but we were number 8, and each one was allocated a section of beach that it had to do so much work on the morning of the landings, as soon as we landed, before the troops with big stuff, the armour and that could all come in. Now what happened then was you got split up and went back to your units. Now I went back with the engineers and the other fellas. We had a bit of everything. We had infantry, signals, engineers, all mixed up. We even had one man. There was an airborne man in the boat when we got a boat, and he was called. It was great, very funny at the time. Used to take the mick out of him, something terrible. He was the seaborne section of the airborne. And his job, as soon as our boat touched down, was to go forward with a mobile motorbike, fold-up motorbike, a little tiny one, to meet up with the paratroops where they'd landed further behind the German lines. So he'd got to make communication with them, if possible, from the beaches back to the airborne. But he was the seaborne section of the airborne. As I say, after every manoeuvre or organised event that we had, you never saw these fellas again until you started to come back to a big camp, which used to be at Southampton. And then you'd see them all driving in again a month or 2 months later. Oh, hello, Bill, hello, Jack. And as I say, I hadn't seen them for weeks and weeks. And this went on right up until the day of the invasion. The invasion itself was planned for June the 5th, not the 6th of June, the 5th of June, but the weather was too bad and we were held up at the time. But what we did do, we did one gigantic exercise. They took 28,000 men in this beach group from Bournemouth to Edinburgh in 3 days. And that was to test the way the beach group could move. We landed up, we finished off the 1st of 4th, and you could actually see the golf course, St Andrews. We were in them sand dunes all around there. And that was the first time we were ever sprayed with mustard gas. And this was done up there in those sand dunes at St Andrews. Sticky blobs used to fall on you from these planes as they came over. Whether it was the full strength stuff, I do not know, but it used to be done. And it was all done as a good training if it happened on the actual day of the invasion. Nothing was left to chance, nothing. I don't know whether Charlie had that. Did you have that, Charlie? No. Did you? No. No, well, probably my part in a beach crew was a bit different to your own. But that's what we had done to us. We came back in another 3 days, and that's the first time in my life we pulled into a big staging camp. I mean, 28,000 men on the move is a terrific amount to accommodate when you think about it. And we came through because we had too, twice, up and down. And we pulled in a place somewhere just outside Birmingham. We never did know where it was. I know that somewhere they've had the first jet engines made. Because somebody was roaring there one day, and I said to this fellow there, "What's that?" He said, "Oh," I said, "that's a new jet engine that they've got." But anyway, we didn't see the engine and we didn't do it. But when we got there, there was 10 brand new dustbins all lined up. And they were all full of tea. And you went with your couple of Dixies and you just scooped a pot of tea and away you went. That's the first time in my life I've ever had a cup of tea out of a dustbin, but it tasted all right anyway. Then finally we gets back down to Bournemouth, and from there they started to put us in what they called transit camps. And the transit camps then, once you got in that transit camp, you began to see the people that get into your boat every time, because sometimes they couldn't get into your boat because you hadn't got one, but you pretended. But anyway, we were now getting towards the boats, you see. We're getting closer as the days went by. And we got down to Southampton Common, and we were there something like 8 or 9 weeks on Southampton Common. And then 1944 had gone, and we were getting good qualities guns and things like this. We get much better equipment and things like that. And there's an old picture there when I was in the Home Guard, and that one there shows you an old Winchester rifle from the American War. So you know what we had in those days, but because they went, and after some periods we had a Tommy gun, which I thought was great. But then they swapped them for Sten guns, which weren't so very brilliant. If you didn't watch what you were doing, you used to cut your hand open, opening them up and bringing them back. And then, of course, I say, in these staging camps, from there we were given a 7-day leave. And this is now early June, end of May, early June. I know we only got back to the camps 4 days before our departure from the camps to the real boats. And from there, I came home to Biggleswade and had a talk with my father, and he was saying, it's going to be a long time, boy, before we see you again. I said, oh, I don't think so. But anyway, we got back to the camps, and from then on we were sealed in those camps. You couldn't write a letter home, you couldn't receive a letter. Any letters you had to burn, and nobody was allowed in or out of that camp at all. You might as well have been in a concentration camp. Nearly as bad, because the food weren't very brilliant. But anyway, we was in there with these Canadians, so we did probably get a bit better food than what the Tommies were getting. As I didn't tell you right from the start, I was in the Canadian Army. I was with the 3rd Canadian Division, you see. And on one of these pictures you can see the Canadian Divisional sign on my uniform. And this was simply because the Canadians hadn't got any beach groups. Nobody to clear their mines for them, nobody to move the tank traps out of the way for them, and things like that. Well, anyway, while I was in the last week of before the invasion, we were in these camps, and every morning, regular, we used to have to go to a gravel pit that they had in the woods, and they had a big Nissan nut in there, and that gave you the whole of the beaches where we were going to land. It didn't say one single name, but there were quite a number of pieces on the map that showed areas likely to be flooded. Most of us thought, hello, it's going to be Holland. Never even thought France at that particular time, because nobody knew until we actually sailed where we were going. Nobody knew. Some of the top officers might have done, but they didn't tell us anyway. And every morning at 10 o'clock we used to march down to there, and they would supply us with new photographs of the Germans working on their defences on the beaches of Normandy. So every day we got an up-to-date picture. And one time, Spitfires and the Mosquitoes, that's the ones that used to take the pictures, but they brought us back an up-to-date picture every single day, without fail. We were then shown the beach we should be landing on, still no names, and we would recognise it with the church spire here and the building over there. One is a building that you will see, whenever you see D-Day, you will always see this picture, that one. You can have a look at it afterwards. That shows you a big building on the beach, and if any of you have seen The Longest Day, so many of you have, that building's actually on that film where Roger Moore stood with his bulldog as the beach master, and that is right on there. And that was the railway station at Bernier-sur-Mer, which afterwards was the place I found out we were going to land. Now, after this, as I say, they couldn't have left anything to chance at all. It was brilliant organisation, in my opinion. You hear one or two of these people say there was a few cock-ups. Well, there always is. You can't be off that. But basically, when you think of the men involved, because that by midnight that night they had landed 135,000 of us in Normandy, and that's a terrific amount of people, you know. Anyway, getting back to that, now we come back to the actual embarkation. So anyway, we all packed up our gear, but before we did, we had one other day of sorting our bits and pieces out, throwing a lot of kit away that we didn't want, and they told you what you'd got to get rid of. You weren't supposed to have any single letter on you, no identification other than your dog tags and things like that. And that's how it went along. But then during the morning, we had to go down to the Nisnut again, had a look at the quick photographs. He pointed out to us on that particular morning, you can get through the barbed wire there, lads, because those Germans have been coming down there to swim. And you could actually see the German soldiers had come through the barbed wire to swim. So we knew that was one open passageway. But these are the sort of things, brilliant they were. And then we had to go to through another one with the MO, the doctor. Two doctors there actually. And they had this fella standing on the table in this Nisnut, and it was quite warm. And he took all his clothes off, every stitch. He hadn't got nothing on. And these doctors were showing us what to do to assist if any of these people were wounded. Bearing in mind, there weren't going to be ambulances there waiting. That all that was going was the ambulance men that were going with us. And you were expected to do as much as you possibly could with your first aid kit that you got filled bags, packs and one thing and another. And that weren't very much when you thought about it. And on this man, he drew with a blue pencil the arteries where you could stop off the blood and do this, that and the other, so assist until some ambulance man was found. So he's busily doing all this, I passed out. That is the truth. Just watching that. And when I come round, the major said, "What's the matter?" Well, I'm not used to this sort of thing, you know. And one or two of the others felt a bit squeezy, like it, things like this. But he said, "Oh, well, what are you going to do tomorrow then?" I said, "Well, I'll have to think about it tomorrow." But anyway, that was a fact. And I began to worry to myself, well, if you can't stand that, mate, what you going to do the other side, you know? But, and then we had the parson. He come and give us a talk before. And he said, "No, I know you're all broad-minded, so it's quite all right." And this is army language, really. And he looked at us and said what a terrible time the French had had. They'd been occupied for over 4 years. And the women would sell themselves for a bar of soap. So immediately the meeting was over and that discussion was over. They all dashed up the naffy and bought all the soap they could buy. And that's a fact, you know, these things that went on is unbelievable. And there were some funny sides of this, you know, as well as the serious ones. And so they did. Then the next thing was to get rid of all these bits and pieces, all spare water bottles, spare billy cans, anything you got spare that wasn't your official handout, stuff you sort of gained over the months and years previous. And I said to my pal, I said, "Well," I said, "look at them water bottles." I said, "We might as well have a spare one of them." I said, "You don't know what's going to happen to ours." And sure enough, we both picked up a spare water bottle and we put it on a belt, and so we had two. We shouldn't have had two, but we did. We had two. I thought, you might want some water when you get over there. They might have poisoned it. They might have done anything with it. So we'll have two. Anyway, we did have two. You'll get another laugh over that too when we get there. And then, of course, away we went. We went down there and we went aboard on the Saturday afternoon. This was before the 6th of June. And the weather was so bad that we were told it was all off for 24 hours. And I'll tell you this, until they handed us live ammunition, we didn't know whether it was another manoeuvre or not. We'd had so many manoeuvres, we'd been on and off boats so many times, we'd even been down the channel for 5 days and back again with a whole armada to see if the Germans were watching us and keeping an eye on us. So we didn't really know until that time, but when we went aboard on the Sunday morning, they brought round a little tiny book. Showed a picture of the Champs-Élysées and the big monument at the top end there, the Arc de Triomphe. And then in big letters, how to behave in France. Well, needless to say, we read that. And we all said, well, I said, you wait till we get to Paris. But I never ever got to Paris, and that's why Charlie Cook's tour started, I'll tell you. And from then on, I've distracted myself now, haven't I? Anyway, as I say, we were on the boats. Then they brought round French money. We knew then it was in France we were going to land. Until that time, we couldn't get off the boat, by the way. Until that time, we didn't know where it was going to be. Anyway, we then knew it was France, and we then knew it was for real because we got 50 rounds of ammunition, live ammunition. And they came then round to tell us it had been postponed for 24 hours. The sea was so bad, the sea was so rough. I mean, even the fellas were sick in harbour, tied up. So you know what it was like. Now, I was fortunate in the actual crossing because I was on a landing ship. Some of them were on landing craft infantry, some of them were on landing craft tank. Well, there was, as I say, there was 50 or 60 different kinds of landing craft. And but I was on a big ship. It was the Duke of Wellington. And on the side, instead of the lifeboats, they'd got 14 landing crafts, 7 one side and 7 the other, just hanging there like that. And as I say, probably the seasickness didn't affect me quite so much as it did some of the fellas in the smaller boats. Going across that night, after it was very late on the Saturday night when they said we were going to sail. We sailed Sunday. We were halfway across. Something turned wrong with this landing ship I was on, and they had to make a hasty retreat back to Southampton. It was something to do with the water system on the ship. And with over 1,000 men on that ship, they'd got to have fresh water. Anyway, they did it, they repaired it overnight, and we set sail again in the early hours of the 6th of June. And we got back to where we should have been the day previous. We were back on the right station, as they called it. Then, as the evening went on, and we sailed somewhere about midnight, I think it was, we finally left Southampton. The day before, Churchill had been all round the Invasion Armada on a big speedboat with his fingers up and all the rest of it. We'd set sail, and I went up to the, most of them were playing cards, poker and one thing and another, in the bottom of the ship. They were losing a lot of money, especially the Canadians. They couldn't have cared a damn, the Canadians. You couldn't have gone with a finer bunch of blokes, and some of the bravest fellas you could ever see. And I went right down to the bows, and I sat there nearly all night long. It was the most fascinating sight you can ever imagine. As far as you could see, you'd think you could walk across the channel. There were so many ships. There was almost 6,000 ships. And as I say, the organisation to get that lot going. When you think the Americans sailed all the way from Plymouth right round the top there, they had to leave 1 hour before we did from Southampton because of the distance and the time. It was over 100 miles across the channel. They did think at one time of landing at Calais, but of course that was too heavily fortified and one thing and another, and I don't really think it would have been a success if we had done. Not seeing the bunkers and things after the war that was up there. But anyway, what had happened, the minesweepers had gone in front of they're all in convoys, these ships. All going one way, of course. The orders were that whatever ship was hit, nobody was stopped to pick up survivors. That was an order through the whole of the fleet. Nobody would be picked up. I doubt if that would ever have happened. I'm sure somebody would have picked somebody up. I never saw any problem, so I guess there was none. But the minesweepers, as they went across the channel, had laid lights on the sea with a cup like that. I don't see them, Charlie, did you? And inside that cup was a little tiny light, and you could only see that little light from the sea. The airplanes over the top wouldn't have seen it or anything like that. But there were so many. It was just like going down a motorway. It's unbelievable. Well, this went on for a few hours, and we were due to land at 7:30 in the morning at Bernieres. And as it began to get daylight, things began to get a lot more interesting. It looked very, very grey. As I say, the sea was really rough and bad. And the cliffs and hills at the back in France, you could see one part of it was all grey, and then down that dropped to a level part where we were going in on the three beaches, Sword and Juno and Gold. And other than those three beaches, there was, to the left of us, the paratroops had been dropping since midnight, the night before. We'd got strict instructions what we had to do, the first job we had to do when we landed. And every man knew what he'd got to do. This was the beauty of the invasion. You see, normally when an army goes into battle, all right, they're in France and they go into a battle and so on. But this army was coming from the sea. We'd got no defences, none at all. There's only the Germans dug in blooming great dugouts, I'll tell you, concrete bunkers and so forth. What have we got? Only the plywood boats we were going in, and that's a lot different. But we had a terrific navy there. They had Rodney, Ramillies and Warspite, three of the biggest battleships we've got. And they were a sight. And when we got within 12 miles of the beach, we got off this landing ship. They dropped us into the water with a small landing craft, because from 12 miles from the beach, you cannot see anything over the horizon. So the big ships were dropping us small ones who were going to land first. And we could get within 2 miles of the coast before anybody saw those small boats. They'd be about as long as this room from me to those doors, and there was 30 men in them. 10 under that side, 10 under that, and 10 up the middle, with a flat front. And every time the wave hit like that, the water came over the top. And by the time you got near the beach, you were wet through up to your knees, and I wonder why I get arthritis, you know. But I mean, this happened time and time again, and you was used to it. But I think being in an open boat like that, you don't get to see sick as them. It's a bit crowded into smaller confines. But anyway, we went forward, we dropped off, and then those boats, when they dropped us at the beach, had got to come back and fetch 2 or 3 more loads for the journey. By that time, of course, the landing ships would come in a little bit closer, because the Germans would have known we were there anyway. Well, our first floater, as I say, is 14 boats, and we all set sail towards the shore. I suppose we were about 2 miles offshore, when all of a sudden we started doing a circular movement, just like the old wagon trains used to do, you know. And the sailor that's driving this boat, he's only like a car, steering wheel he's got. He sits up there in a little tower just above you, just you can see over your heads like. What's gone wrong there then, Jack? You know. Oh, that's all right, he said. We're 3 minutes early. 3 minutes early. In the meantime, the German gunners had picked up some of the landing craft and started to shell the landing craft coming in. So you could see these shells getting closer and closer with the splashes in the water. So some wit said, well, I think it's about time we bloody well went, don't you? And well, within a few seconds we'd started off again, and we then split into a line and went straight towards the beaches we were going. Now, according to what we'd been trained in that Nissanut, in that gravel pit in Southampton, we've got to look for the church spire, we've got to look for this railway station here, and they were the 2 points for our beach group to make in on. Now, we had 2 companies there. There was one on the beach that we were on, and another one 2 miles down the coast to my right, which was Corsairs. And to this day, if you ever go down and have a look around the various fortifications, you'll see tanks that they pulled up out of the sea and everything else, Corsairs. But Bernières wasn't a port. It had been a summertime place where they got all little bathing huts all along the seafront and everything else. And believe it or not, one was called Charlie. That's true. One was called Charlie. And today, if you go there, you'll find a huge, great block of flats built right on the beach, right on the entrance that we blew in the first place. But as we came in, as I say, the bombardment was terrific from the ships behind us. You get 1.5 ton shell was being fired from these battleships, and you could hear them going over your head, sucking the air through as they went through into the German defences at the back. And the rocket ships, 2,000 rockets they used to fire in one go. We talk about rockets and that now in Iraq and Bosnia and places like this, but these are terrific, these landing ships with these rockets on. And one of the most, well, not fascinating, but terrible things were 3 Spitfires are diving on the beach, machine gunning the beach as they're coming in. And as they do, they go through 2,000 rockets. Didn't see them. You can't see them. Vanish in mid-air. 3 Spitfires, just like that. Gone. It's then you begin to wake up and say, "Oi, this is for real." And until that particular time, you don't really realise what you're letting yourself in for. And Biggleswade was a long way back then, by that time. But no, it's soul destroying when you see, well, 3 pilots like that just vanish in mid-air. But anyway, these rockets kept landing. I thought, well, there can't be anybody left alive on that beach. They just can't. But anyway, we got closer to the beach and we had a very, very good run in as far as the water was concerned. When we got out of our landing craft, I mean, just run down a short ramp, and I suppose we was in about 2 foot of water, that's all. And we were within 50 yards of where we should have been. Now, to my mind, with all what we've been through and all the organisation, to land within 50 yards of where it should be, that's back of this room. You know, it's wonderful. And the first thing we had to do was to blow a part of the sea wall up. That sea wall had been built. There had been a gap there before in years gone by, but to stop any stuff getting off the beaches, the Germans had put concrete blocks in there, you see. Well, our job was to get it out before the tanks arrived. And this is why the timing was so terrific. If you didn't get that moved by the time the landing ship came in with the bulldozers to start with, an armoured bulldozer used to come in, and he cleared the rubbish away that if you'd done your job and blew the concrete block up, so that the tanks could come straight off the landing craft in the village and in. Otherwise, what you're going to have is a whole load of stuff piling up on the beaches for the Germans to sit and lob shells over as fast as they were. Because up until lunchtime, all those landing craft used to fly a barrage balloon. That was to stop German planes strafing the Navy as they came in. But they had to do away with them by dinner time. The German gunners on the hills behind had picking them up, and they were training their shells on the barrage balloon. And so they were hitting the ships at sea. Quite crafty when you think about it. But so they did away with them by dinner time. But so the fact we did that, we got rid of that concrete block within 2 or 3 minutes of doing it. In come the landing craft, in comes the armoured bulldozer, doing his job. He shoves all the concrete to one side, out the way, and all the rest of it. He's a sergeant. He gets onto he gets out of his cab, stands on the track. I said, "Don't move." I said, "You are in a minefield." Between the whole of the beach and the village, there was a stretch of sands there which was heavily mined. And you could see that with the amount of Canadian soldiers that laid along the railway track. And there was quite a lot, I tell you. "Oh, that'll be all right," he said. I said, "It won't." Anyway, he jumped out straight onto a landmine. I got a hit at the elbow. One of my mates got hit as well, not serious. He took the full blast, blew both his legs off. Now what could we do for a fellow like that? You see, they're the sort of things that you don't see in the various books and things like that. But we strapped him up as best we could with these field dressings. But he died within, what, half an hour. But he just didn't listen. Either he didn't listen or he didn't hear us with all the racket, because we did shout, don't jump. But he did. Anyway, they had to bring in another, one of the first tanks that comes in had to pull the bulldozer back and shift it out of the way. But from then on the tanks could get into the village, and the whole of that morning then we spent clearing the exits from the beach. That was their sole job. Removing the big stakes the Germans had put in with mines on top, taking them out. Some of them were shells on the top, some of them were flat telemines on the top, taking out the detonators, sticking them in a bag, and we did that, as I say, right up till late afternoon. During that afternoon, by this time we'd had nothing to eat, and we knew when we left England that nobody was going to serve us for 3 weeks, because our transport wasn't coming for 3 weeks. So we were going to get no fresh clothes, no fresh shoes, no supplies or anything. We were told we'd got to live off the land or make best we could on what we found. Certain trucks coming in, there would be supply places, but you've got to send somebody for ration packs and things like this. We'd got 3 ration packs, 24 hours jobs, and they'd all been issued to us. They were very, very good ration packs actually. And the ration pack itself, you used to get a bully beef soup, was about as big as 2 oxos, as hard as iron, but it used to make good soup. And the tea, sugar and milk was in another cube, which was very much like an oxo cube, but that used to come out green. But within 10 minutes of being on the beach, I saw 2 or 3 loads of lads brewing up tea underneath the sea wall, and that was a fact. So all these sort of little things began to follow on from the fantastic training that we'd had. And late that afternoon I said, oh blimey, I'd lost corks out of both my water bottles. I hadn't got a drop. A Snowy, a Palamine. Oh well, I got a couple, but he hadn't. One of his had come out and he'd only got one. So, and there weren't a lot left in that, so I had a little drop anyway. I said, later, about another half an hour later, I said, I've got to have a drink from somewhere, mate, because I said, there's a little old farmhouse there, let's go over there, you know. We hadn't seen a lot of people at that time. And I knocked this door. Nobody came. I knocked it again. And it's just opened a crack in the door, about as big as that. And in my best English, I tried to tell him I wanted some water, and because not being able to speak French or anything else, because we never had any of that. Otherwise we should have known where we was going, weren't we? But we didn't get any training in languages. I thought, well, how am I going to tell him? And as I looked through the door, in the corner of the room, I could see one of those old earthenware sinks in the corner, and the water was drip, drip, drip off this tap. So I pushed the door open and I went, oh, no, 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 he said. And his wife stood near the sink. He said, no, Marie, Marie. And he really thought I wanted his wife. That's true. You can imagine the fear on that bloke's face to find a bloke with a gun at his door wanting to come in. You know, I can see it now. But to him it must have been a terrible thing. You just imagine it. Somebody knocks your door at night, opens it, and you've got a gun in your hand and he's saying he wants pointing at your wife. Anyway, I pushed him aside and I walked straight across to the tap and filled my water bottle up, and he was quite relieved. As a matter of fact, he offered us a bottle of wine. But it just shows you these sort of things that can happen like this. Anyway, as the afternoon bore on, the weather weren't no better, and we was told we should be staying there in that village for the next 3 weeks, whatever happened, for the whole of the build-up to come in, as we should have to be used for clearing mines in and around the village. And there was some there, because he laid 6 million mines in 1944 in 4 months. Rommel did. When he got down there, he realised. But what he did do, he put up a lot of signs, actual meaning, on places where there weren't any mines. Now, you couldn't ever risk it. So if you came to a field and you were told to clear that of mines, you went straight right through it and probably never found nothing, except small shell cases or something like that. And that was awkward. But anyway, let's finish the first day over there. And we'd been, as I say, near this little railway station. They said to us then, I think the best thing we can do is blow this railway up. It was only a little tiny one-track railway, came from Corsails right along the coast to where we were, Berniers, on the sandbag, into Caen, and that was it. All right, well, we'll blow it up then. So we blew it up. 3 days later, we put it back. They decided they'd use a little train from Corsails, which was a port, to bring the ammunition stuff up to the ends. But anyway, that's one of them things that happens in the army, isn't it? And sure enough, it's there. And that station's still there today, actually. And that afternoon, they said, well, things is moving, traffic's coming off the beach now and moving into the village and going the other side of the village. And we are then 2 miles from the German front line. And that's how that stayed for that first week there. 2 miles from the Germans and the sea behind us. They asked us then to clear the road through the village up to Main Square, Little Market Square, through to the other side, make sure there was no mines there, nobody hiding in the buildings, because it was a sorry sight. It was June and all the rambler roses were hanging off the walls that had been hit with shells and guns coming in, and that, you know, that's another scene I often see. All these rambling roses, yellows and pinks, all hanging down off these wrecked walls. Terrible sight really when you think about it. And we went up and we cleared this, each side of the road, only a little track I suppose. It was about half the width of a normal road I suppose it was. And we come to this one house, and I said, on the corner, I said to my mate, well, better have a look in here, cover me for this, so he did. I kicked the door open, because you weren't very polite in them days, you had to do this, to anything for quickness. And I saw a sight then that I regretted ever going into that place. There was an old lady, her husband lay dead on the dining table, and she got 6 candles around him. And it's a terrible sight to see, you know, it really shakes you rigid when you see these sort of things. And I gracefully came out backwards, explained to him what happened, and we left it at that. We carried on into the village. We picked up 3 mines before we got to the market square, and the lorries had been running up there then, and that very often happened. They had special things to, flails they used to call them, huge great tanks with a big drum on the front and chains slashing and hitting, knocking off. Once they hit the detonator, they set the mine off, which was great. But if they didn't, they made it a darn sight more dangerous. And very often on these lanes you could get, they'd been running lorries up and down these lanes for 2 or 3 days. And all of a sudden, bang, somebody go out, and they'd just caught the mine right. And that did happen. And 2 days after this, the ducks, you know what a duck is? It's the motorised vehicle that swims in the sea and comes straight up out the doors. They were fantastically used in Normandy. And they refused to go up this road one day. They'd lost 5 men that morning shot through snipers, because in that village, up until nearly 3 weeks later, every night those snipers used to have a go at somebody or other, and they were being fed by French people and sheltered by French people, and that's the fact. And he came up. Funny thing is, he gave me a pamphlet the other day, and something for the Normandy Veterans Association, and this fellow was arguing the toss about a church spire that he thought he'd seen blown up in Berniers-sur-Mer, you see. Well, sure enough, the bit I'm telling you now, the Canadian came up with his mobile gun and said, "What's the trouble?" I said, "Well, these duck drivers won't go round up this road until we get rid of that sniper." "Well, where is the sniper?" "In that church tower." No English officer would let us do anything. They wouldn't let us fire a machine gun at that tower. Nothing. "You can't damage a church." "Oh," he said, "well, can you get them ducks to move over a little bit?" Which we did. And in the meantime, he'd put a round of ammunition in his big gun, come up to the corner, whoosh, boom, church fire had gone. Full stop. No more trouble. And the ducks worked all through that day, and, well, as far as I know, right for a few weeks after that. But that was a fact. The snipers, it was terrible. At night time, we never used to see nothing of the German bombers during the daytime, or very, very little. A couple of Messerschmitts one day come harrying along the beach. We all jumped, I jumped straight into a latrine pit. Just imagine that, won't you? It was, actually, that scene, those two Messerschmitts, is in The Longest Day. If any of you have seen that. And I was saying to some of these earlier, I have now got a video. I think really now I'll give you this talk, you ought to see it sometime, because it's all official war films. And it verifies virtually all what I'm telling you. And it's from Germany. The films come from the archives of the museums in Germany and various countries that took part, America and Britain. And it really is a good video. And it's all taken from that series they did on the BBC, World at War. It used to be on every Sunday night, if you remember it. Well, I've got a whole series now, but that actually is a very, very good video of the D-Day landings. And it gives you the different officers' views of it, if you like, and they speak their minds of it. One or two of the Yanks are a little bit stupid, but there we are. But that would really be worthwhile you seeing it. Or if you haven't seen The Longest Day, see The Longest Day, because we didn't have any Cary Grants and John Waynes and that there then, did we? Anyway, we got settled into this village, and see, we had 3 weeks to clear up, as I said. We lost quite a few fellas there. Some there, you can see the graves of them there in Bayeux Cemetery. And we got to know the French resistance that had been involved. And one night, this lady said to me, "Well, you've been here with us nearly a month now, Charlie." She said, "Would you like to come to dinner with us? We've got a reunion thing tonight." I said, "Where?" She said, "Down at the old farmhouse." Oh, I said to my mate, "Well, this is all right, mate, we better go down here." We hadn't had a lot of good food. But, so anyway, we went down. Oh, there was about 30 or 40 people in the big old French kitchen, twice as big as this room. Huge, great place it was, old oak beams, a lot, real typical French. It was the wine and the calvados, mate, and the cider. And then she came up with a turkey. Huge, great turkey. And I said to Snow, I said, "Look at that, they've cooked it with this bloody head on." And they had cooked this turkey with this head on. I said, "Well, I don't fancy any of that, you know." We were real Bedfordshire yokels then, weren't we? And anyway, we had the turkey. And she came round with a pot in her hand. And a spoon. "Yeah," she said, you know. I said, "Well, if they cook the turkey with the head on, Snow, what's in this jar then, you know?" And could not be asked before, and she kept on and on, "Yeah, very good, very good." I said, "Well, I ain't eating that till I know what it is." So anyway, I picked it up, smelled it, I thought, yeah, it smells all right. And then she saw a fly, and she went, "Crikey, what's this got to do with flies, you know?" But no, mel, she kept saying that. And it turned out to be honey. And it's their custom, when they've had a turkey meal, to have a spoonful of honey. But who's to know that, when we're in the strange French, you know? But that was another little story there. They were very good to us, actually, those French people. But what we did, well, what I organised was, The Americans used to come in with huge, great landing ships, and they used to cook all their own bread, all their own fresh food, everything. So about 2 or 3 days after we'd been there, I said to my pals, I said, you know, there's a way we could get some of this nice fresh bread instead of these blooming hard biscuits you couldn't eat. So what are you thinking of then? I said, I'll tell you what, I said, tomorrow morning we'll send 2 men down the beach to pick anything up they can find, any rubbish they can find, old German tin helmets, anything they can find. What are you going to do with them? I said, I'll show you what we're going to do with them. We did. We picked up old bits of guns and all sorts of things, arms full. Come on, walked down there, waited for the landing ships to come in. Called the old boy off the ramp. I said, look, we've got a lot of souvenirs here. I said, all we want is some fresh bread. I came away with arms of bread that had all been cooked coming across the channel. And from that day onward, my section was known as Cookie's Cabaret. So they'd settled for that. But we did that several times then after that. And that saw us through. 3 weeks later, in the meantime, we'd had the big storm again in the channel when they had wrecked the Mulberry Harbours and all the rest of it. And actually, they were getting very, very short of ammunition. And things were getting very, very tight. So what they were doing, they couldn't land the ship. So what they were doing, they would use what they call rhinos, huge, great rafts, steel rafts. The stuff was all on them, put onto them from the ships, onto the rafts, and they used to let the sea wash them in. And then as soon as the tide went out, they used to go around these rafts and pick all the stuff off. Well, on these rafts was our transport. That arrived after the 3 weeks, they said, or 3 weeks and 2 days actually they were. And we had half a dozen of these lorries come off that night, so we'd got some fresh clothes and things. And up until that time, I hadn't took my shoes off. We'd slept in a hole in the ground in this field for 3 weeks up until that time. And I said to the old boys, I said, well, what we'll do then this morning, we'll have a bath. How we can have a bath? Where we can have a bath, you know? I said, well, there's always the sea, there's too much rubbish in the sea. I said, I'll tell you what to do now, we'll boil some water up, and we did. So what we did, if you remember, the army petrol cans were about that square. So I cut the tops off some of these, 1 leg in each, pour in the hot water, you was all right. So I said, all right, well, what we'll do, we'll do 3 or 4 at a time, and into the orchard, strips all off into the orchard. First batch in, who walks through the orchard? 7 or 8 French women. Do you know, them women never turn a blind eye. They just said bonjour and then walk by. But that's the first bath we'd had in France. And as I say, oh, my feet were terrible. They really were. Smell. And we had no clean uniforms. Anyway, we got all this stuff off the lorries and we had a real good change. And that evening, one old boy from London, Tarsi his name was, real cockney. What's it like out here then, child? I said, well, it's quietening down a bit now, I said, but it has been a bit rough. So he said, well, will it be all right then if I sleep under the lorry tonight? I said, no, I wouldn't do that. I said, because they come every night. The bombers did come every night, didn't they? I don't know many nights when they missed, but they were very high flying, and they used to drop canisters of bombs. In each canister was about 500 smaller bombs. And they used to jump about like jumping crackers all over the beaches, all over the fields, you name it. And they were very, very dicey things. And as I said, we dug these holes in the ground, but what we did, anything we found, like a bit off a tank or a plate off a tank, we used to put it over the hole, cover it up and make another exit, see? So in the end, we'd got a warren. It was like a rabbit's warren in there. We'd got pieces of iron and metal everywhere, mate, you name it. And sometimes you say, yeah, but if we drop in that end, the blast will let us here. So they used to block that end up and go another way. It really was funny. But that's the way we spent most of our time, in holes in the ground at night. As I say, he used to come over with these jumping cracker bombs, and sometimes he had Stukas with sirens on, and they're terrible. They are terrible sounding things. They put the wind up, even if you didn't rub a bomb, they put the wind up. So, but anyway, these things went by, and as time got by, we finally got out towards Caen, which was I mean, we'd been in there nearly a month, and the big breakout was getting ready to start. The seas had stopped being so rough. The Mulberry Harbour had been put together on. They were landing then 35,000 tonnes of stores a day, and that's a lot of tonnage, really. Opposite where we were, the beach, we had 6 big merchant ships, had all been sunk to make a breakwater to stop the rough seas. And a lot of the ships used to come straight up the beach until they grounded. Then when they'd unloaded over the sides, the lorries used to go around them over the side. When they wanted to get them back out to sea, they used to go behind them, huge great troughs of bulldozers, just big channels dig out, tugs out at sea, and as the tide came in they used to pull these ships off again. And that's how a lot of the landings were done, to get the material there, because that was going to be the trouble. And another thing they had over there was called Pluto. Have you heard of Pluto?
Yeah.
Pluto has pipeline under the ocean. That fed Normandy with all the petrol it required. 1 million gallons a day. Do you know where it came from? Everton. Everton. That was pumped from Everton right down through Britain, and the pipeline's still there. They still use the pipeline to pump stuff from Southampton back up to that depot. So when you think the lorries that saved, and when we used to see these huge great barrels in Southampton water, what the devil are they, you know? And then we used to see the Mulberry Harbours. They were just the same. And those big Mulberry Harbours, so that the Germans didn't see too many of them, when they'd built one, the 450 tonnes each of solid concrete, well not solid, concrete, they used to sink them in the estuary, sink them. When they wanted them, they pumped them out again and towed them across the channel. Everybody thought we were balmy, taking your own port, but if they hadn't took that port, I don't think the invasion would have been a success, to be quite honest. It really was, you know. It's something to be believed, but it was after these sort of things, as I say, you began to realise that there had been a fantastic amount of organisation. And then we moved up, as I say, getting ready for the big breakout. And on the 18th of July, I was just going past the old farm where we had the big dinner, and I could hear the terrific noise coming in from the sea. And the farmer's wife said, "Charlie, come on, quick." And I ran, went upstairs in the bedroom. I need to look. Went upstairs into the bedroom, and I have never seen a sight like it. There was 2,000 bombers coming in from Britain across nearly sea level to bomb Caen. 5,000 tonnes of bombs they dropped on Caen, and that farmhouse 2 miles away was doing that. You never saw anything like it in your life. When that first started, the German guns over Caen were all firing at these airplanes coming in, and the whole of the sky was black with gun smoke, you know, where they were bursting. By the time these planes got through, there was hardly a shell being fired. And by the time the lot got through, there wasn't a German battery firing, not one. Now on the 17th of July, the Canadians on that front opened up with their guns, big guns, and they bombarded Caen for another 6 hours. 6 hours. Then the orders went for the infantry to go in. In the meantime, we'd been clearing a few mines to make it easier. But the infantry went in. They got thrown back after all that bombardment. And the people that threw them back was a Hitler Youth Division. A lot of kids in there were only 14, 15 years old. If you ever see this video I'm talking to you about, you'll see them in there. Little old fellas like this, you know. It was unbelievable. And the French people were spitting at them as they come by, prisoners. But, you know, you have to admire the old boys when you think about it. We say much about our youngsters today. I mean, would they fight? Well, I think they would if they come to the situation. But then on the following day, with my last day in Normandy, because I trod on a mine and my journey was over as far as Normandy was concerned. and these Canadians picked me up, put me on the door of a house, on the back of this Jeep, took me back to the beaches. 2 days later I was back in England, and from there on I went up into Scotland, and I was up there 1 year and 11 months in hospital in Scotland. But we did recover, and as I say, but I couldn't have had a better time in hospital there. I think they were absolutely magnificent, the Scotch girls, women, nurses, the lot. They really did look after us. But I could go on and tell you lots more about different things like that, but I think we've gone on long enough, haven't we? But as I say, I used to write to the fellas, still out there, and we used to get quite a lot of cigarettes given us in hospital, and chocolate and stuff like that, and we used to pack it up and send it out to the boys out there. And they did write to me right up to the crossing of the Rhine, when they bridged, my company bridged the Rhine from one side to an island in the middle, and the middle then to the other side. So they went right the way through, they did. But I was always disappointed I never got to Paris, as we were all young boys, and it was one of our key things. The first thing I did when I bought a bus was, right, 7 days to Paris. And that's how it all started. I probably wouldn't have had any bus tours to Europe if it hadn't been for Normandy. But I had an early trip during the Normandy campaign. And I've got some pictures here if you want to come and have a look and ask me any questions. But can I just read you this? This is what Montgomery wrote. This is the official Normandy Veterans Association handbook. And this is what his personal message from the Commander-in-Chief was, to be read to all the troops before they embarked for Normandy. The time has come to deal the enemy a terrific blow in Western Europe. The blow will be struck by the combined sea, land and air forces of the Allies, together constituting one great Allied team under the Supreme Commander, General Eisenhower. And on the eve of this great adventure, I send my best wishes to every soldier in the Allied team. To us is given the honour of striking a blow for freedom, which we will live in history, and in the better days that lie ahead. I don't know about that bit. In the better days that lie ahead, men will speak with pride of our doings. We have a great and righteous cause. Let us pray that the Lord mighty in battle will go forth with our armies, and that his special providence will aid us in the struggle. I want every soldier to know that I have complete confidence in the successful outcome of the operations that we are now about to begin. With stout hearts and with enthusiasm for the contest, let us go forward to victory. And as we enter the battle, let us recall the words of a famous soldier spoken many years ago. He either fears his fate too much, or his deserts are small. Who dare not put it to the touch, to win or to lose it all? Good luck to each one of you, and good hunting on the mainland of Europe. B. L. Montgomery. So there we are. That completes my bit. As I say, I've got some very interesting pictures there.
Thank you much, Charlie. Before we actually finish the tube, we've got another 5 minutes. Are there any questions?
Yeah, far away.
From anyone?
It was so good, and explained it to us,
Yeah, that's right.
Hey?
I said, you've said everything so well and explained everything to us.
Well, it's the first one of these I've done, actually. I've been going to do it for a long time. But I really think, you know, sometime you ought to see that video.
Yes, we can arrange that another meeting.
I mean, you can see that in it, true.
First meeting next year.
You know.
We'll have a video.
All right,
Yes,
you'll have to let me know.
of course, yeah. But yes, we'll be pleased to see you again.
Charlie, were there many civilians killed when you bombed Caen?
Well,
Funny enough, through the resistance, a lot of them had been told the night before
yes.
that we were coming in to clear the villages. Either that or take cover. And there wasn't all that many, but that particular old fella in that house, you know, he was a very old man as well. Whether it was a shock that killed him or I don't know. There's quite a lot of houses damaged. But there was a lot of fresh flowers on German graves. You know, it wasn't very nice. I'll tell you one little thing. I had a job to do one day. This officers come out and said, Charlie, they want you down the other side of the village. The padre wants you to clear a minefield. I said, oh, all right then. So I went down there, see what he wanted. He said, we're going to bury some of the fellas here. So we did. We cleared this thing of mines. They'd never found a mine in the place, but what had happened was 2 Bren gun carriers had actually hit a mine, blew them all up. The guy were full of mines, and the field was full of bits and pieces. So we spent nearly a day just picking up bits and pieces. There was no mines in the field. And then a bulldozer came up and done this gigantic great hole. There was a lot of people buried in there, civilians, Germans, soldiers, anything. And I said to the padre, he said, you're not very happy, are you? I said, no, I'm not. I said, if that's what they think of you. After all this, he said, oh, don't do it like that, he said. They'll come back after the war and they'll bury all them. I said, how can they do that? He said, well, he will, he said. I'll pick them all up and rebury them. So I said, well, how are you going to do it? So he said, well, of course we will, he said. I said, you don't know who them people are. I said, you took all their identity discs off them, you've wrapped them in a blanket. How are you going to know who they are? And then he said to me, well, if you think that's difficult, he said, look at this. And he brings out one soldier's wallet that he'd got, and it was full of photographs. Here, there was a lovely girl. Here, there was another lady and a little girl. He said, where do I send these to? He said, you think you've got problems? And he brought a lot of this out to me, you know. What do I, if I send that home to that girl with a little baby, is that his girlfriend? And you know, you don't stop to think of these things, do you? But he really put me right. And you know, the first thing I did, I was about 5 years after Normandy, after the war, I went back, and the first thing I went to do was look in that filming field. But you couldn't see whether they'd dug it up or what they'd done, but I can't ever see it. I can't ever see it. I can't see how they could have told who the people were. He might have had a list of the names and that, but who's who? You know. But they're the sort of things that worry you afterwards. Oh! But I don't suppose I shall ever be any wiser.
Very interesting.
You're getting old, mate.
Hey?
You're getting old, mate.
Getting old?
You're getting old.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think we've had a marvellous speech.
Wonderful.
Has anybody got any questions for Charlie?
And nobody can ask me what I was thinking of when I went in.
What was you thinking of?
As that boat went in, I looked at my watch. That's 25 to 8, that'll be just going to work down a bundle. That's exactly what I thought.
Were you jealous?
Eh?
Were you jealous?
And I thought to myself, well, they won't know where you are, boy. That's a certainty. That's a fact, that was.
You should be so lucky, Charlie. I was in a similar situation, but very much hotter out in the desert.
Hotter? Oh,
And
yeah.
all I could think of was, I don't know if I'm going to the room.
Yeah, I did. I thought, oh, we're just going to work down a bundle and they won't know where I am.
Did you ever think, Charlie, shall I survive this day?
No, I didn't. No,
I did.
we had too much to do.
Yes.
We had too much to do. No, I never ever thought that.
I only saw a demonstration by the engineers picking up mines, you know, and I thought, well, it's not for me.
Yeah,
That was only dummies.
that was all right. As long as you didn't get distracted, that was the trouble. Once you were distracted, that's when you got your doing.
Anybody else got anything to say? Yeah. I'd like to thank Charlie very much for coming this evening. It's been marvellous. Thank you very much,
Thanks
Charlie.
very much for inviting me.
Very interesting.